Hey, what's up, branding experts? Arek here at Ebaqdesign, and welcome to On Branding Podcast. And today, my guest is Joey Cofone, and Joey is the founder and CEO of Baron Fig, and he's also an award-winning designer and entrepreneur. So Joey's work has been featured in Fast Company, Bloomberg, New York Magazine, Bon Appetit, Quartz, Mashable, and Print, just to name a few. And so today we're gonna talk about creativity because Joey just published his new book, which I have right here. The title is The Laws of Creativity, Unlock Your Originality and Awaken Your Creative Genius. So hello, Joey. Thanks for joining us today.
What's up, man? It's a pleasure to chat. I am really excited. You're in Brooklyn. I know that. I'm in right over the water from you, and I've got the chaos outside, but we're gonna
do it anyways. That's how we do
That's
it.
how we got to do it in New York,
right? Exactly. Okay, so I got your book. It's a really interesting book. It's obviously about creativity. It's very comprehensive, 400 pages. So basically, in your book, you present us with 39 laws of creativity, right? And the premise of the book is that creativity is not really magic. So results can often, they look magical, but the act itself is not. It's not like it's the creativity, some kind of a talent that only a few selected were born with, right? It's more of a skill that we can develop. And so we can use this book as a resource to help us harness the power of creativity that you argue is already within us. So we just need to remind ourselves. So this book is a reminder, right? Can guide you us through some exercises. So I wanted to start with a simple question. What is creativity? And maybe can we start off with you telling your own story, the story about the worm? I think this will make for a great introduction. And then from there, we can go to your definition of what creativity really is.
Yeah. So creativity is definitely a thing that's been on my mind forever. And it's resulted in a company, Baron Fig, that makes tools to help you think. The book, The Laws of Creativity to Master Your Ideas. But it all came from this day. I was 7 years old. I remember it so clearly. And I walk into first grade and my teacher's there. And for some reason, she had like a 1980s haircut. Man, it was like it was like a fro. Okay. With the curls. And she was a lovely lady. And she handed me a worksheet and it was to color a worm. Okay. Super simple. You color, cut it out, put it on the board. So I'm like, all right, cool. So I go to my desk, I put my arm around the page, I get my crayons, and I'm like, this is going to be the greatest damn coloring on anyone in the class. So I do my thing, and I guess I took long because I was like the last person to go up to the board. And I'm walking up there, and everybody's stuff is already up, all the worms. Even though they were a little different, because sure, the people colored it with different colors or used dots and lines and whatnot. Fortunately, they're all together, they look the same. In this little kid, Joey, 7 years old, my heart sunk and I was like, I can't put mine up. It's no different. So I go back to my desk and teachers, Joey, is everything okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. I forgot something. And now I'm sitting at my desk, like, what am I going to do? So I'm like probably close to tears at this because this is like the most important thing to this little kid. And then I'm looking down and I see all these pieces of paper on my desk that I had cut out the worm. And I'm like, oh my God, bright light ticks on. I can use this. I can use this. Wow, it's like thunder out. I can use this. So quickly, I draw a microphone, a boombox, and clips. I cut them out. I accessorize my worm. I go put it on the board. And now it is the most unique worm up there, like, bar none. And the teacher comes behind me. And I remember so clearly, she just says, I've never seen anything like this. No one has ever done this. And so since that, in first grade, 7 years old, I have been addicted to the feeling of changing an idea just a little bit so that people are surprised and doing something new. And that has just driven me for the next 30 years.
Yeah, that's a great story. And yeah, so you were so proud. I think that we can all relate to that. We have this desire to create something unique, original, and be recognized for that. Right? So you describe this even in more detail in your book, for example, about like how proud you were smiling. You knew that this is something different. And yeah, so this is a great introduction to talk about creativity because you argue in your book that creativity. So maybe let's start with your definition of what is creativity, because many people can understand this as many different things. So how would you define creativity?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So I think we get like we have all these ideas about what creativity is and those stereotypes and whatnot. But at its most simple, creativity is just the practice of ideas. That's straightforward. And the average person has 6,000 ideas a day. So the purpose is, hey, why don't we take advantage of all these ideas that we're having and use them since we have them anyway? And so then you have the laws of creativity, which is helping you do. Can you
Right.
hear that?
Yes, but that's not a problem. I think that's it's still okay. I can hear you well, and I hope our listeners as well. So this is what's creativity, right? Creativity is basically, coming up with those ideas. But okay, so what is not creativity? You say in your book that creativity is not a talent, and you can actually develop your creativity. Is more of a skill, right? And
Yeah,
so why
I can
creativity? Maybe we can go. Yeah, we can. Yeah, go ahead.
I can
You
dig in
say
on that for
something.
sure. Yeah.
Sure,
Are we allowed to curse? Is this a cursing podcast? I gotta watch my language.
that's okay.
Okay. So the idea that creativity is the talent is bullshit because people think that you're either born with it or you're not. Right? And that is like, okay, then no one wants to learn anything if they think they can't get it from the beginning. And it's absolutely false. You don't have to, you don't have to take my word for it. Okay. I mean, you read the intro already, NASA organization that puts people on the moon. They're not wrong. They're very precise people. They did a
Mhm.
study and found that 98% of kids at age 5 are at the creative genius level. 98. By adulthood, that number goes down to 2%.
Yeah.
So what my book is essentially doing is saying, number one, I don't have to teach you creativity because you already know it. I just got to help you remember. But number two, there for such a reliable drop from 98 to 2, that means systematically society is doing that is beating it out of us.
Yeah.
The first part of my book, the book split into 3 parts: the creative
Yeah.
thinking, the creative process, and then how to be really good at the end. And that whole first section, before I could even teach the process, is changing your thinking. And it's really important that you start to slowly tune your idea of what creativity actually is versus what, society has told us that it is.
Yeah, and you elaborate on that in the book. As you mentioned, the NASA study. So we are all creative, and then like we lose it, with the time. I have also some of my key takeaway from this part. So why creativity is important. So for our listeners who are most likely designers or entrepreneurs who are interested in branding and design. But creativity is important in every discipline, right? It's not, of course, as a designer, you need to be creative, but also as a copywriter, for example. So in writing, in music, in personal development, and definitely in business in general, right? So as a creative individual, we can come up with better ideas. We can validate those ideas in a better way. We can command more attention and get better opportunities, and as a result, make more money, right? And you mentioned you basically structure your book into three main parts. So I wanted to actually structure the podcast in a similar way because probably won't have enough time to talk about all the 39 laws of creativity. So let's do this. Maybe you can give us a couple of examples from each part. So I wanted to start with the foundation, with the mindset, which, as you mentioned, is super important. So the first part is about the mindset. The second part is about the process itself, how to start, how to start creating from start to finish, and then it's about the excellence, right? So how to think creatively? A very simple question. Can you talk to us about this foundation, about the mindset?
Yeah, and chapter 1 is chapter 1 for a reason because it's titled "Be Weird." And so this unfortunate thing that we've done as a society, probably a global society at this point, which is we have weaponized the word weird. And it sounds dramatic, but think about, in high school, oh man, that kid is weird. Or at the office, that person is weird, right? And that becomes a negative when actually what we're saying is that that person isn't like all of us. Actually, weird in the sense of being creative and expressive, it's a form of self-expression. The weird person is the brave person putting themselves out there and letting their weirdness show. And so the first chapter is like, okay, fundamentally, you understand that. Sure, Joey, I get like what actually means. And, I'm a big fan of practical think. I'm not to talk to you about my crystal ball and BS. I put it simply, think about it this way. Say you've got 3 things that you're really into, Eric. Let's say a book or a movie, an activity, like something you do for fun. Can you name 3? And they don't have to be your
Basketball.
favorite.
A
Basketball?
basket.
Okay.
Yeah, I play basketball. What else you said about music?
It could be
In what
anything.
category?
Music is great.
Yeah, play.
Favorite band?
Yeah, so
Sorry.
music, hip hop, for example. I
Cool.
like hip hop. I listen to hip hop when I work. I listen to instrument. So I'm not disturbed by the words. I play basketball for fun. I do kickboxing for fun. And yeah, I love reading books and learning new things, completing
No.
courses and
See, this is awesome. You're like already, there's so much of who you are, and it's amazing because this is how the example works. So you've given me basketball and kickboxing. You know, I'm 6'3", love basketball. You gave music, hip hop. Let's say I like Logic, okay, the rapper. I like Jay Z, but we'll go with
Daisy.
anyone.
Oh,
Jay Z, he's the man. And let's say the book will use the laws of creativity because I'm biased right now.
okay.
Okay, so we for three things that and there's way more to you than three, but let's take these three and then 1,000
Yeah.
options each, which there's way more than 1,000 books, and there's way more than 1,000 artists, music artists, and 1,000 ways you could play sports. Let's just say with those
Yeah.
three already, there is a billion permutations. You are, and there's 8 billion people on earth. So you are already just one in 8 people. That's how unique just with three. And if you had a fourth item, there's
I should add riding a Harley. A Harley
Harley,
ride.
my
That's
man.
very
My
unique.
Yeah, my family has a couple Harley. They used to go all the way to the West Coast and go up and down. So let's take the fourth thing now. You got your Harley riding. With four items at 1,000 each, there's 128 billion permutations. That is way more than the population of Earth. So if you get just those four things into your work somehow, your work is mathematically unique. You are
Mhm.
actually provably unique. So when you start to take all these things in your life and you let them into your work, quote unquote, let yourself be, you actually systematically can start to produce unique things without thinking because you're being yourself. You're more unique than you think is where I'm going with this. So that
Yeah.
is the beginning of part one foundation and how you can start to think about ways in which you can look at the world where weird is actually a positive.
Yeah. I really like I think being in some this is the first law you mentioned in the book. My favorite probably from this. There are key some of my favorite. So for example, challenging assumptions, the law of disruption, thinking in combinations, the law of connection, and things like embracing fear, welcoming failure, and just having. What are you? What? Which ones of those are the most like important or closest to you?
Yeah, it's tough because they're sort of the way I wrote it, you stack on top of each other. Like if you don't really
Yeah.
under law one, it starts to go number two and so on. But it continues, that becomes less. But I think what's really important for me is number four, the law of unknown. I think that is the one that
Mhm.
probably gets people the most because the very idea of being creative is doing something where you don't know where you'll end up. And
Mm.
if we go all the way back to that NASA stat that I mentioned, where you go from 98% creative to two, part of the reason that we do that is because when we go to school as kids, we are taught that you can see the end from the beginning. So what I mean by that
Right.
is we're given an assignment. Hey, you have to write 3 pages on the plot of this book, or you have to do a geometry proof why these two things are right angle. And so when we start, we already know where we're supposed to end. And for 20 years, we're trained that. And then you go into the real world and you all of a sudden understand that life is just a complete. And if you want to be creative, you must do the opposite. Never know where you're. And so the law of the
Mhm.
unknown speaks to that and to get beyond the fear. And fear is, I'm sure you feel this way. Like for me, I've been a designer now for over 2 decades. And every time I start something brand new, I still am, is this going to be the one I can't do? Like before I get,
Yeah.
I'm an incredible performer, but it's still like Michael Jordan didn't go into the game knowing he was going to win. He knew that he was going to fight to win. And I think it's
Mhm.
as a creative, you don't know where you're going, but you know that if you do this process, you can get there. That's
Right.
the law of the unknown.
No, I think all these artists and creatives can relate to that. When we start a new, I have this, I know like I'm confident because of my experience and in my abilities, and I know that I'm gonna create some great, but it's just I don't know how it's gonna like, how many experiments we'll have to run, revisions, how great how this idea will evolve over time, right? So I cannot say at the beginning, where I'm going to. I'm just confident in my abilities. Very important. Embrace this unknown. Okay, so let's talk about the process. So the second part is
Yeah.
about the process, how to create from start to finish. Is the laws of action. All of these, I like. This is what we do as designers, right? As the book is a kind of like, for example, asking questions, defining the problem, gathering inspiration, right? This is kind of a process. That. So can you just walk us this?
Yeah, for sure. So the second part is the laws of action. And there's two ways you could read the whole book, start to finish. This section in particular is chronological steps to creating. So if you wanted,
Yeah.
it could guide you through creating from no idea all the way to publishing
Mm-hmm.
your idea, or you could just. So the way I think of as a collection, I think this is really important, is think about traveling. I haven't been to every city in the world. You haven't been to every city in the world. But if I say, Eric, hey man, how do I get? I haven't been to. Have you been to?
Not yet.
Cool, perfect. But we both know how to get to Berlin. You
Yeah.
go on the internet, you book a ticket, you hop in the taxi, you go to the airport, you fly, you either get a rental car, you get in a thing, and you follow signs, and you get to. Creating is the same way in that I don't need to know what's at the end to know how to get right. The process of traveling. I don't know what's at Berlin, but I know how to. So
Mhm.
this section is all about that. And I think one law we could really talk in relation to the law of the unknown is the law, because you mentioned it, doing many versions, is the law of iteration, where
Yeah.
it's
I really
essentially
love.
right? Like iteration
Yeah.
is, yeah, I actually think designers, yourself, myself, we have to, in order to be a good designer, I have to overcome a bit of your human nature to be a bit afraid of what you don't know, to keep going, to keep iterating. And so those, don't concern yourself with quality, rather prioritize the iteration, because
Mm.
what happens is actually, that quality over quantity. My watch is what it
Siri
doesn't
wanted to.
tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Siri's like, I got the, but what it doesn't tell you, it just tells you the destination. It's like, hey, I want to end up with something nice. It's useless. What the real full thought is in my mind is quality over quantity, but quantity begets quality. So the more you do, the better it gets. So like
Mm-hmm.
even what you said earlier about you're doing a bunch of versions and you don't know if you're going to do 5 or 10 or 20, and you're not so concerned about this being the perfect version. It's just another. And
Yeah.
that could be a hard pill to swallow. It's also reassuring that, your goal is no longer to, it's instead of doing something right, you just got to do it.
Yeah. You
And
just need to
that's,
start. Yeah. Exactly. About this in your book, about the tenacity and determination, and not right. Just putting your right mindset to to be able to go, hard work and those managers, right, and never. Yeah, and as a designer, especially, I think we relate that, when we design something, it's like even in right. When I speak to I started hiring, right. It's it's almost impossible to get things right first. You have to write something. You have to start somewhere. You have to do some research. Just start writing, and then you're gonna rewrite that, and that's how you're gonna get better and come up with something that is really good. Sit down and your Word document or whatever, and you start. So iteration is about making revisions and getting
yeah.
and maybe another one we can talk. So maybe sketch out, like the importance of, what do you think? Is there any that you wanted to talk about?
There is one that I think I really want to kind of get across in a short amount of time is the law of simplicity. And it's
Oh,
about
yeah, it's a good one.
engaging in limits, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when someone says you can create anything, oh my goodness, it's almost whereas if you have tight limits, you're able to progress. Actually, I like to do it as say I drop you into a 300-acre field in the middle, and I go find it at the gate somewhere, and you're like, where the hell to go? There's so many options. But if I put you at the big road and I said, find the end road, you're so limited. You can only go in one direction. And so we can
Right.
actually leverage that in our own work, is what we can create limits around what we're trying to do. And you can do that by sharpening the problem or the question that you're asking. So for, when we made our pen and thing, right? Our goal,
Yeah.
we could have made a ton of different pens. We could have made pens for, I don't know, lightweight pens, ones that are good on by doctors or lawyers or whatever, an infinite amount of options. We were curious, could we make the simple object and as a pen? What does that look like? And so that was it. At any time we were designing, it was constantly, how do we pull more away from this pen? Is it really necessary? So, one cool thing we landed on is, I know pens aren't exciting, but this really was super cool to pull off, which usually a pen has two different parts, separate parts. The one is to extract the tip. So you either click or you twist top. And then the other part is if it's got ink inside, usually about halfway on the barrel, you twist it open, you could take out the ink and put it in another ink. What if we could take those two things and make them one bot? So I've got our pen that we ended up making, which has
Mhm.
one part. I'm holding it up, everybody. It's got no clip. It's super straightforward. If you go to baronfig.com and look up Squire, you see it. And this part at top not only extracts the tip,
Yeah.
but if you twist it past the stop, then you can take out ink. So
Mhm.
the simplest object possible was the limitation. And so we were able to say, oh, as much as we want this really cool clip, that's not as simple as it would be. And so these limits make things easier. I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as designers, we yeah, definitely, So one thing is to do iteration and experiment with different variations of the same idea, but the other thing to just kind of like direct yourself, limit yourself and focus on simplicity as well, because it's not always about adding stuff to the idea. It's sometimes about and creating that focus. I think that there was some metaphor I forgot about. What was that about? You elaborate more, about the simplicity. I just having this like illustration, just
Uh,
yeah.
The attention pie, is that the attention pie?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So you cool. Not only when you make, is there the challenge of making it, but there's a challenge of communicating it. And I came up with the tool called the attention pie that could work. People have a limited attention span, and the more information you put in, the harder it is for them to. And it's super straightforward. Imagine a pie with 100 slices in flour. All your slices, 100 of them are focused as flour. Okay, that's a yellow flour. But if I tie a bow around it and I give it to you, now it's 50 slices and 50 slices. So just by adding an element to the message, I devalue the entire thing, the original element I have. And so the attention pie is a way to deliberately communicate or deliberately add limits so that there's value to the things that you leave in.
Mhm. Yeah, that's definitely something that as we need. Okay, so in the book, in the third part, you talk about the excellence, right? So we are going from the mindset to actually the process, how to do things, how to create things, and as you said, it's more of a chronological order here. And in the third part, you talk about the excellence, stand out and rise
Yeah.
above this. And so, can you talk to us? These laws of fitness.
Yeah, sure. So, over the last 10 years, I've art directed and designed over 100 products from idea to customer. I've learned a whole lot. And on top of that, I've been able to work with incredible creators like James Clear, Roxanne Gay, just tons of people. In this third section, great. Eh, One second. Can you hear me? My mic cut out.
Yeah.
You
No,
got me?
we can hear you.
And third section is essentially, I got lucky to observe these things over and again. And I put them into the laws that I observed that these people and to really rise above everyone. And so the laws of greatness is, a set of laws where, okay, you think creatively, you've got the creative process under your belt. And how do you take your game and do this that make you really phenomenal? And I'm not pulling any punches in this section, but get here, in the beginning, like more encouraging. And I'm like, you got this, you can do this. And then I'm like, cool, keep it going, keep it going. of like, you're getting towards black belt now. And now I'm like, come on, you're not as you could like, oh, pull from deep within to really, I started with the law of showing up, which is if you don't do work, do work, period. And then I go into the importance of discipline because a lot of, can have trouble with discipline. I go into the law of chaos because a lot of people who are creative have trouble, and then I talk about how you can refine your thinking more, how you can refine your workspace, how you can go the extra mile to pull ideas. And I tell all these, in every chapter, actually, there's a story for all of them. And you kind of really to learn from, greats like Bruce Lee, Miles Davis,
Yeah.
Anthony, Zaha Hadid, who she's like one of the greatest architects of all time, and pull these thoughts together into something that, hopefully.
Right. So, okay. So some of my key takeaways, as you mentioned, the first one is to show up. You have to have you need to take care of because you have to have this mental endurance, right? So people to do different things sometimes, travel, discover new things, do new things, and have a vision, have a something inspiring to. It's all about the selling and doing the work and showing like designing your environment so that you can.
Absolutely. There's
So no, go ahead.
I got a of this section because it's called the law of symbiosis. It says that your body's
Mhm.
more than a container for your brain. It directly affects the quality of thinking. And I tell a story, Serena Williams. And she is the best female tennis player to ever play. She has more male or female tennis player. And Serena admits that tennis is 70% mental. Process that for a moment, where in such a like the champion of all champions, who's in incredible shape, says that only 30% is her physicality and 70%. And the chapter goes on to explain how there was a woman who was a scientist named Wendy Suzuki, and she was pretty unhealthy. And she goes on a trip, and she's just like, work is not working out for us. She goes on this trip to Peru, and
Mhm.
she's rafting and camping, and she stops for a moment, unloading the canoes, and she's realized, God, I am the link. She looks around, and there's all these physically fit adventurers. It makes her never want to be the weakest link again. So she goes home. She her Bay approach from academic work to shape. And what happens is after she gets in shape, she has an epiphany where she's sitting in one night. All of a sudden, she's realized my she's like,
Mhm.
my writing never goes well. And she also noticed that her memory and her attention, her mood are all far better in shape. And so she turns all of her scientific studies towards the relationship between brain and the body. And
Mhm.
essentially, she comes to the conclusion and she proves it through science that when you take care of your body, your mind works better. The easiest way that I could is healthy. Everybody can agree that your heart is going to work less. Your heart is in danger, or you're like, well,
Mhm.
that's the brain thing. Just because it's intangible, we don't think about it that way. But when you can take care of your body and be healthier, your mind operates better. You remember more, you focus more, is
Right.
easier, just happy in general. And so this is a law that I really like, and it does belong in this section because I have noticed that a lot of incredible creators who make a living off their ideas take care of body because
Mhm.
they've, whether consciously, there's a connection that helps them do what they do better. And so this chapter is all about that. I really appreciate that. You've got creatives who neglect that because they don't.
Right. Totally agree. I noticed myself that even in my industry, some of the former people in my industry, they all exercise. They have some kind of a discipline. Just going to the sports. I think it's important. So we should 80s because there is definitely like after moving, after exercising, if you keep your body in the right shape, your mind is going to be in good shape, right? You have this release endorphins and stuff like that, so As a result, you can come up with more creative, right? Or be more efficient.
Absolutely.
Of course, I'm going to link in the description below. People can to you website, social media.
Yeah, sure. For people who want to check out the book, the easiest way, go to joeycofone.com. Or if you want to check out Baron Fig, which I've been building for 10 years, baronfig.com. And of course, Instagram and Twitter, both at Joey Cofone. Tell me your creative challenges. I'm down to chat.
Okay, awesome. So again, joeycofone.com, baronfig.com, and we're gonna link to the book. Thanks again. Thanks for sending over the book, and thanks for coming
All
on
right,
the show.
thanks, man.
I really appreciate
Pleasure,
that.
dude. Nice
Thank you.
chill out.